Chapter 1. Angel Sisters Healing. Important. There are elements of torture and rape in this novel. Please don't read it if you can't stomach it. GGG. The sounds around him were incredibly creepy, making Lin Tian slowly open his eyes. He was confused. The scene in front of him made his hair stand on end. His back went cold. Everywhere. There were sharp-toothed, big-nosed, pointy-eared, small-limbed, deformed-looking monsters. Because the light was dim, their blood-red eyes made it even more terrifying. Lin Tian's mind had only one thought, a firm thought. This place was the netherworld, and those around him were evil spirits, because he was already dead, hit and killed by a car. However, a shy, hurried cry came from a distance, making his blood boil. Lin Tian looked in the direction of the sound. His spirit jolted. Hiss. Have I gone to the netherworld? Or have I gone to Western Pure Land? Just 10 meters away, something was happening that made one's blood surge. Two pure-looking girls were being dominated and used by several evil spirits. This is paradise. It must be paradise. Otherwise, why would there be angel sisters to heal us? The more Lin Tian thought about it, the more excited he became. Because of his position, it seemed like he was in line. There were 8 or 9 evil spirits in front of him and a long line behind him. All were waiting for the angel sisters' healing. Save me. Why is this happening? Why am I being violated by these lowly creatures? But my body won't listen to me. Don't save me. I want to die. I don't want to give birth to disgusting goblins. Hearing the angel sisters' voices, Lin Tian was stunned. Wait, why are the angel sisters crying for help? Hiss. Goblins. These ghostly things are goblins. Suddenly, Lin Tian realized he had crossed into another world, and he had reincarnated as a lowly monster from anime. A goblin, although he didn't want to accept it. He couldn't refuse the angel sisters' healing. Goblin or not, he decided to get the job done first. At this moment, an invisible force was surging crazily within Lin Tian, making it impossible to think of anything else. Soon it was his turn. With only 2 goblins ahead in line, if there had been space, he would have rushed forward already. But suddenly, a roar came from the bushes ahead. It made everyone's hearts tremble. Scum. I'll kill you all. 4 or 5 tall humans rushed out. The flash of swords and shadows, of course, they were all around 7 meters tall. But to goblins, who were only about a meter tall, they seemed towering. They wore simple armor, held iron swords, and wooden shields, their faces full of intense hatred. Aha! In an instant, the goblins lying on the human girls were cut down by sharp blades. Green, sticky, foul-smelling blood splattered all over Lin Tian. After reacting, 23 goblins around quickly picked up wooden sticks to fight back. They swarmed like bees. Among the humans, a nun in a white robe stood out, holding a magical book that moved without wind. She began chanting a spell. First-tier magic. Holy light impact. Boom! A blinding golden holy light exploded, and with a strong impact, all the goblins were blown away 10 meters. Lin Tian couldn't avoid it either, feeling like all his bones were about to break. Captain, kill me. On the ground, a girl cried, her eyes full of despair. The stubbly man with the iron sword had a heavy expression, suddenly thrusting his sword down. Another girl had already bled to death, her blood sticky and foul-smelling. The stubbly man roared. These disgusting scum have mated with humans. They must not be spared. Kill! The genes of goblins were very peculiar. Besides being able to devour the flesh and blood of other creatures to gain abilities and evolve, they could also improve their potential by mating. For instance, a goblin that never mated would never evolve and would have a maximum level of 10. Even mating with low-level animals like wild boars or baboon could increase its level cap. But if it mated with magical creatures or other races, it could evolve into a big goblin. If it mated with humans, it would evolve into a big goblin even faster. The stronger the mating partner, the higher the evolution cap, potentially evolving into a goblin hero or even a goblin overlord. Moreover, goblin secretions contain special components that, once a female creature came into contact with them, would forcefully override their consciousness, making them almost entirely lose the ability to resist, completing the mating, avenge them. In an instant, the battle broke out. Of course, it was a one-sided slaughter. These humans had incredible combat power, slicing through the goblins like chopping vegetables. For Lin Tian, who had never fought, it was terrifying. All he saw were severed limbs. The ground was covered in foul-smelling blood, making it hard to take a step. As he hesitated on how to step, the goblins had already been slaughtered, leaving only him. Captain, what about this goblin? The white-robed nun used magic to encase Lin Tian and spoke. Lin Tian inexplicably felt comfortable and hurriedly begged for mercy. I'm human. I actually reincarnated as a goblin. Don't kill me, Sister Nun. I believe in God, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Mother bless you. Involuntarily, Lin Tian began to fantasize about being taken in by the nun sister, developing feelings, and reaching the pinnacle of life. This was the typical trope of a world-crossing story, but the next second, the previously charming nun's face turned icy cold, her eyes filled with disdain, as if looking at a pile of shit. She said, "What a disgusting thing. How dare you mention God? The Holy Mother's name coming from your mouth is a sin." She then prepared to take Lin Tian down with a spell. At this moment, the stubbly man spoke. Wait, this goblin seems a bit clever. Let's take him back first. I want to study him. He might be a mutant. The two exchanged glances and smiled. Lin Tian didn't notice anything amiss, feeling extremely grateful. Great. Brother Captain, when I turn back into a human, I'll repay you well. Is that so? Then I'll be waiting for your repayment. However, after being taken back, Lintian was completely dumbfounded. Look at this poor little guy. He's barely breathing anymore. It's my fault for being too rough. I'm going to cut off that thing of his and make it into a specimen. Boring. I played with him for just half a month and killed him. Not even recovery potions could save him. Let's catch a few more next time. Listening to their mocking voices, Lintian's consciousness gradually faded. Finally, he died in this life. Around him were various torture tools stained with green sticky blood. And the stubbly man and others were laughing smugly, still unsatisfied. Ding. Life simulation system binding. Amanon, you died because of your stupidity, forgetting that you were a goblin. How could humans trust or pity you? You died from endless torture and pain. The suffering of these days has even imprinted on your soul. As a transmigrator, this is the most tragic death, without exception. Finally, your body was made into feed and completely devoured by a pig like Monchan. Life will restart shortly. Remaining lives, Excerpt. Remaining life simulation attempts, Excel. Cooldown time 10 days. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. Survive. Congratulations. You are back to the moment you just transmigrated. As a goblin, you are preparing to enjoy the angel cistern, but be aware that the system's gift of lives has only 2 left. If you use them all, you will die completely. Sean? Being able to mate with a human, it's worth dying for. Hurry up. Hurry up! These 2 breeding tools can still be used for a long time. A group of goblins shouted excitedly, still lined up in a long queue as before. Lintian revived again, but the intense heartache from the torment remained. It truly felt branded into his soul. His facial expression gradually twisted, looking more and more like a goblin. Remembering what happened before, he started running backwards desperately. He had to escape. He had to run as far as possible while he could. No matter how tempting the angel sisters on the ground was, he didn't look at them. As long as there were mountains left, he wouldn't worry about not having cute angel girls in the future. Sure enough, after running only a few dozen meters, he heard the sounds of a fierce battle from where he had been. As before, it was a one-sided slaughter. I must escape. Escape. I want revenge. Lintian's expression was filled with hatred as he used all his strength to flee. Swish. Suddenly, a blinding cold light flashed in front of him. The stubbly man had already caught up. There was also the white-robed nun, looking at him like he was garbage. As always, coldly, she said. This disgusting little cockroach almost escaped. Captain, how should we deal with it? Something seemed to explode in Lintian's mind. They caught up with him even like this. Turning his head, he realized he had only run about 100 meters. The goblin's legs were too short, and its overall strength was too poor. For these human experts, they could catch up in 6 or 7 seconds. Damn it. Should I fight? Lintian gritted his teeth and unexpectedly found that looking at the stubbly man, a symbol appeared above his head. It must be the system's ability. Loader. LV25. Race. Human. Profession. Swordsman. Title. Leader of the Blades of Valor. Disciple of the Sword Saintess. Health. 200. Strength. 30. Defense. 50. Skills. Sword key slash. Sword dance. Holy skill sword return to heaven. Equipment. Iron armor. Iron sword. Level 1 recovery potion. Overall, 400. Looking at these attributes, Lintian was stunned. There was no chance of victory. With an overall combat power of 400, and he himself was less than 50. Small goblin. LV5. Race. Goblin. Profession. None. Title. Low-level monster. God's blessing. Health. 20. Strength. 5. Defense. 5. Skills. Gene devour. Equipment. None. Overall, 30. Looking at his weak attributes, Lintian wasn't too surprised. After all, goblins were always the easy-to-kill small monsters in games and anime. But coincidentally, he was a creature blessed by a god, gained some unique abilities, such as body fluids, that could make all females lose the ability to resist and fall in love with goblins. At this moment, the stubbly man Loader said evilly, "We can't let it off easily. We must make it wish for death. To avenge our new members?" They were too careless, acting alone in this enchanted forest, not only getting severely injured by a demonized steel-toothed boar, but also getting by these disgusting cockroaches. The white-robed nun spoke, her face becoming slightly evil as well. Lintian had already seen through their nature, struggling with all his might to escape, but it was futile. You died again, hung on a tree, and cut into pieces. Wild dogs followed the scent of blood and ate you completely. You overestimated your strength. Goblins are indeed the lowest creatures on this continent. You also underestimated human strength, especially since the other side is a disciple of the Sword Saintess. Transmigrator. You have only 2 lives left. Keep going. Swish. With a buzzing in his head, Lintian returned to the moment of queuing again. This time, he came back with even deeper pain. Lintian gritted his teeth and quickly calmed down because time was short. There was at most 1 minute to react. If he couldn't think of a way to escape, what awaited him was still death, and a more painful death. Running is definitely out. Reasoning won't work either. Who would believe a goblin? Lintian thought quickly. Although he had 1 life left, he wouldn't allow such a ridiculous thing to happen. Dying 3 times in a row? What kind of protagonist would that make him? Who would be willing to play the protagonist's role of counterattacking in a desperate situation? Whoever wants to play, go ahead. But I need to save my own life. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration hit him. He shouted, "Everyone prepare for battle. Prepare for battle. Humans are about to attack." Then he stepped forward and pulled the goblins off the angel's body. Because the ones who enjoyed it first were always the strongest goblins in the group, they were caught off guard and instantly killed at the start. So the first 2 times, the entire army was wiped out in less than a minute. As long as he could hold out for a little longer. Even if it was just 3 minutes, he could escape. Upon hearing the word humans, the goblins' expressions instantly became alert. These creatures were not particularly stupid, just purely evil, with nothing but malicious thoughts in their heads. Immediately, those with wooden sticks grabbed their sticks. Those without picked up stones to throw, and some hid to launch surprise attacks. Seeing this, Lin Tian quickly started to run away, not caring about anything else. The other goblins were still a bit confused. Didn't he say they were humans? Why was he running away? Before long, the bearded men arrived as expected, disregarding why Lin Tian was running away, and directly started the battle. This time, because they were prepared, dodging and pulling away, the goblins survived for much longer. Some of those ambushing even managed to scratch and bite the white-robed nun. But in the end, these goblins only lasted 5 minutes. But for Lin Tian, that was enough. They didn't chase me. Finally, I survived. Lin Tian ran frantically, looking back from time to time, until he ran until dawn. Finally, he had survived the dark night. In the distance, there were flickering campfires and scattered tree leaf shelters. It seemed to be a small goblin settlement. There were probably over 100 goblins. In this forest overrun by demonic creatures, he certainly couldn't survive alone. He could only seek warmth in numbers. Lin Tian immediately walked over, but to his surprise, he was not welcomed but tied up. "Boss, we caught a goblin from another tribe. We have breakfast." A small leader holding a stone spear stepped on Lin Tian's head and said, "In the goblin world, there was no such thing as compatriots. Only members of the same tribe could coexist harmoniously. Because goblins reproduce very quickly with no reproductive isolation. The pregnancy period for any creature was at most a month. The offspring took only 15 days to fully develop their reproductive systems. By this calculation, if willing to reproduce, a single goblin could develop a tribe of over 100 goblins in just 3 months. This was why they were called cockroaches. They reproduced too fast to be completely killed. From a gray-black shack, a trembling old goblin walked out. A few strands of messy white hair topped its head. Its skin had turned from green to gray-black, covered with warts and blotches. It wore several bone-made ornaments around its neck and leaned on a staff made from a human skull. It seemed he had killed humans, and perhaps even mated with them. Lin Tian's pupils shrank. It was a goblin priest. Big Goblin. LV25. Race. Goblin. Profession. Priest. Title. Breeding machine. Old and cunning. God's blessing. Health. 102. Strength. 29. Defense. 17. Skills. Gene Devour. Call. Thorn control. Equipment. Skull staff. Bone necklace. Overall, 200. This was no longer a small goblin, but a big goblin variant. Big goblins were a general term, including goblin warriors, goblin assassins, goblin priests, evil goblins, swift goblins, etc. Their base level cap was 30. There were also hero variants, mutant variants, leader variants, overlord variants, king variants, and so on. Chapter 3. Chapter 3. Female Goblin. Upon emerging, the goblin priest gave a sinister smile, its hollow, crimson eyes glaring at Lin Tian. Then it turned to leave. Taking this as approval, the small leader prepared to start a fire, ruthlessly stomping on Lin Tian a few more times, as if treating him like an object. They were going to roast him alive. This was the harsh reality. Death was always imminent. Who would still dream of transmigrating? Better to wash up and go to sleep. Of course, Lin Tian had expected this. After all, he had transmigrated into a goblin and had access to its memories. He quickly spoke, "I can make weapons. Please let me join you." When speaking to these goblins, it was best to keep the language simple and stiff. Otherwise, they wouldn't understand. Hearing this, the goblin priest halted its steps. It walked back to Lin Tian in a very bizarre manner, using its long, blackhead-covered nose to sniff him repeatedly. Then it said, "No scent of lies. Release him. What kind of weapons can you make?" The higher the rank of the goblin, the more intelligent it became. And its speech patterns were closer to humans. Simple iron tools are no problem. That way, when we encounter monsters or humans, we can win. Lin Tian stood up, his gaze resolute. He had casually watched a few episodes of Alone in the Wild, which included iron forging. He basically understood the process. Upon hearing this, the other goblins' eyes sparkled with shock. Iron tools. Of course, they knew what those were. The tools humans used to slaughter them. When they encountered those, they would bleed, sometimes losing limbs. Great! We can kill humans and never run out of meat. If we have ironware, can we attack the elf tribe to the north? I prefer elves over humans. The goblin priest was also astonished, letting out an evil, sharp laugh. Then hurry and make them. I'm very tired. I'll do it tomorrow. Having run for half the night, Lin Tian was already exhausted, gasping for breath. Searching for iron ore and forging iron would be too much. Mainly, this body was too weak. Immediately, the goblins began to get displeased, becoming irritable. Feeling deceived, the small leader even pressed a stone spear against Lin Tian's stomach. ready to disembowel him with a bit more force. The goblin priest also looked slightly ferocious. If you can't make ironware, you won't get any food. With that, it returned to the shack. That old creature was extremely cautious, never participating in battles. In its youth, it only focused on breeding and wouldn't come out unless necessary. Lin Tian had no right to make demands now. He could only find a haystack to rest, calm down, and think. To seek revenge, he couldn't rely solely on his own strength. This goblin tribe could be useful, but he had to kill that small goblin leader who dared to step on his face first. And from the conversation earlier, there was an elf tribe to the north. If he could mate with the elves, his power would greatly increase. Thinking about this, he gradually fell asleep. Wake up, wake up. In the midst of his sleep, Lin Tian was awakened by a gentle voice. Opening his eyes, he saw a goblin wrapped in a tattered cloth robe sitting beside him, the hood almost covering its face. It was smaller than a regular goblin. Seeing Lin Tian awake, it tightened the robe, as if afraid of being seen. Are you hungry? Here, take this. The small goblin handed him a lump of something black and grimy, trembling slightly. It was clearly the skin of some creature, still with bloodstains on the fur. Disgusting to the extreme. A pile of dung would look more appealing. Seeing Lin Tian unmoved, the small goblin seemed disappointed. This is all I got, but it's delicious. Try it. Hearing this, Lin Tian looked not far away and saw that the goblins had caught a wild boar and were sharing the meat. So, this piece of boar skin was all this small goblin had to eat today. It might not have eaten for several days. Lin Tian felt touched but suddenly grew cautious. Wait, why are you giving this to me? Under normal circumstances, such a low-level goblin would not help others when it couldn't even feed itself. Too unusual. I don't know. The small goblin seemed confused by the question, feeling as if it had made a mistake. Lin Tian didn't think too much about it and checked its attribute panel. Small goblin. LV3. Race. Goblin. Profession. God's messenger. Title. Female goblin. Fallen god. Pure soul. God's blessing. Health. 10. Strength. 2. Defense. 1. Skills. Gene devour. Wild growth. Equipment. None. Overall, 10. Note, not the heroine, just a convenient tool. What? Seeing these titles, Lin Tian couldn't help but exclaim in shock. What were these? It was known that goblins didn't have females. Yet a legendary female goblin had appeared. In human legends, a male goblin could become a goblin god by mating with a female goblin. Of course, this was just a mockery, since goblins would never give birth to females. To reproduce, they had to mate with other creatures. Hearing his shout, the goblins who were devouring raw meat and drinking blood only glanced at him and then looked away. They perfectly embodied the saying, minding one's own business. Lin Tian gradually recovered from his shock. No wonder this little guy was so intelligent. Seeing his reaction, the small goblin was frightened and sat on the ground. I meant no harm. I just wanted to give you some food. Sob sob. Cough, cough. Sorry for scaring you. Thank you for the food. Let's eat together. Lin Tian quickly apologized. Realizing he didn't need to speak so simplistically with her, he then tore the boar skin in half, stuffing one part into her mouth and swallowing the other himself, though it tasted terrible. It undoubtedly helped restore his strength. The small goblin ate slowly, savoring it as if it were a gourmet meal. Lin Tian wiped his mouth and extended his hand. From now on, I'll be your boss, and I'll look after you. Boss? The small goblin was stunned. In this tribe, she was ostracized not just because of her weakness, but also because she couldn't communicate with other goblins. Ads by PubFuture. Like a normal person trying to fit in with a group of idiots, so the newly arrived Lin Tian piqued her curiosity, prompting her to try and communicate. Okay, boss, I love watching the moon, so call me Goblin. What's your name? The small goblin said excitedly. She even gave herself a name. Goblins didn't have names unless they were high-ranking. After thinking for a moment, Lin Tian said, my name will be Goblin. His surname was Lin, so he simply chose Goblin. Gobu Yue nodded vigorously. It was about time Lin Tian got down to business. He and Gobu Yue climbed a large tree next to the tribe, surveying the surroundings. The area was dense with forests, a few kilometers from the valley. Lin Tian couldn't help but ask, Gobu Yue, have you seen any black and yellow stones covered in dust and very hard? Sorry boss. I haven't seen any. Gobu Yue thought for a while and replied, looking somewhat disappointed. Lin Tian could only nod. This weak goblin had probably never left the tribe and wouldn't know about iron ore. The valley likely had some, but crossing the magic-infested forest was too dangerous. He could only use the life simulation system. Start life simulation. Life simulation system is starting. Current scenario. Integrating into a new tribe. You shamelessly took on a small goblin follower, forming a close bond and finally feeling a bit of warmth. But due to the pressure from the goblin priest, you had to risk searching for iron ore in the valley. On the way, you encountered a fleeing herd of deer. It turned out to be a pack of tier 2 shadow wolves. Gobu Yue died protecting you from the wolves. After much hardship, you finally reached the valley. There was indeed iron ore, but it was occupied by elves. Option 1, leave to be safe. Return in disgrace, score 5 points. Option 2, take a chance and try to secretly mine some iron ore. Otherwise, you won't be able to explain to the goblin priest, score 15. Option 3, search another place, score unchanged. Since it was a life simulation, dying wouldn't matter. Lin Tian chose the second option, especially since Gobu Yue had died. Such a valuable goblin shouldn't be wasted, so he would try any risky option. The sharp-eyed elves discovered you. You were shot in the shoulder by an arrow and died from infection a few days after returning. The other goblins feasted on your corpse. Summary. Your weakness led to this outcome, causing the death of your follower and yourself. Score: 15 points out of 100. Reward: 15 life points. Life simulation complete. Time elapsed: 7 days. Boss, why are you not talking? Gobu Yue's curious voice pulled Lin Tian back from the system. He replied, just lost in thought. Let's go back. Since iron ore was found in the valley, he could only rely on the system for now. Lin Tian checked the function of life points. As expected, transmigrator systems were quite similar. Life points could be exchanged for various items. The lowest level included ironware. 1 life point could be exchanged for an iron sword, iron armor, or a potion. With 15 life points, he could get several iron tools. That was the plan. First, he would appease the goblin priest, then suggest sending other goblins to search for iron ore, gradually establishing his authority. He would take over the tribe. This was the first step towards avenging himself on humans, the bearded man, and the nun in white robes. Chapter 4. Chapter 4, Establishing Authority. Hey, you, where's the ironware? If there's no ironware, we'll eat you. At this moment, the goblin with the stone spear, a minor leader, walked over and urged him. They hadn't had enough to eat from the wild boar just now. He wanted to eat Lin Tian right now. His eyes were full of killing intent, and saliva dripped from his mouth. Gobu Yu quickly explained, wait a bit longer. Ironware isn't that easy to make, but we'll do our best. Hurry up, hurry up. The stone spear goblin didn't listen to him and pushed Gobu Yu to the ground, waving his stone spear and shouting. Lin Tian's expression was cold as he sneered. Here it is. The ironware is ready. Look at this. Suddenly, a cold light flashed. He took out a short sword. Even though it was a short sword, it was about a meter long, very cumbersome to hold, and had to be dragged on the ground. Hearing this, the surrounding goblins rushed over excitedly. Having a sword meant they could eat meat and capture higher level creatures for mating. Especially the elves in the north. Every day these goblins would sneak a peek at them. Just looking was enough. Then you know. The stone spear goblin was stunned for a moment, then became extremely excited. He quickly turned and shouted toward the gray-black shack. Boss, ironware. It's ironware. Swish. Suddenly, a cold light flashed, and the stone spear goblin's voice abruptly stopped. His stone spear and body were neatly cut in half, blood and organs spilled all over the ground. It was Lin Tian who had swung the iron sword with force, slicing him in two. He had long been annoyed with this guy. He was like his former boss at work, always making things difficult and rushing him for trivial matters. Looking at the corpse on the ground, he felt immensely satisfied. He killed a goblin. In an instant, the whole tribe was in an uproar. The goblins who had gathered picked up their weapons and were ready to resist, their expressions fierce, baring their teeth if they all pounced on Lin Tian. Not even a hair would be left of him. Gobu Yue was trembling with fear. What should we do? Boss, I'm scared. Don't worry, that old cunning creature won't let anything happen to us. Lin Tian stood confidently in place. Sure enough, the sound of a staff striking the ground came from behind. The goblin priest slowly walked out and used the call skill, making all the goblins quiet down. Then he said, Kekeke. It really is ironware. Very good. I want more. And I want iron armor too? Okay. But I need people to help, Lin Tian replied. The iron ore had to be found by others. He would stay in the tribe to be safe. The goblin priest pondered for a moment, then used the call skill again, making Lin Tian a minor leader. He could now manage 30 goblins, though it was a small number. Lin Tian had to accept it, otherwise, that old cunning creature would definitely become suspicious. Thank you, boss. Lin Tian deliberately flattered him, making the old creature think he was submitting to him. Then, the priest goblin returned to his shack, a place where no one was allowed to enter. Those who had entered before had all become natural fertilizer. Boss, wait, it hurts so much. On the ground, that minor leader was dragging his half body, struggling to crawl, hoping the goblin priest would save him. After all, being called a cockroach, his life force was indeed strong. Suddenly, he felt a strong force on his head as Lin Tian stomped his head into the dirt. The other goblins were stunned, developing a sense of fear toward this newcomer. These low-level creatures respected power, and Lin Tian's display of dominance made them fearful. But it wasn't enough. Lin Tian coldly glanced at the goblin under his foot and tore off one of his arms to start chewing. The goblin, in fear and pain, gradually lost his breath. Faced with such a Lin Tian, the other goblins couldn't hold it in any longer. They put away all their discontent and cowered, not daring to look directly at him. Even goblins wouldn't eat their kind alive. Lin Tian let Gobu Yue eat his fill first, then kicked the rest away. You can eat now. Instantly, those goblins swarmed over and devoured everything clean. Usually, they were starving because they couldn't catch any prey, always eyeing each other like pieces of fat meat. Finally getting something to eat, no one held back. Boss, you're amazing. You were so scary just now. My legs went weak, Gobu Yu said admiringly beside him. Lin Tian smiled calmly. Don't worry, this is just the first day, and there will be plenty for you. Number 2, what should we do now? At this moment, The other goblins asked, all looking blank, not knowing what to do. Upon hearing this, Lintian nearly fainted. Just call me Brother Lin. Don't call me number 2. Bah. As he spoke, he punched the first goblin, who called him number 2, it to make an impression. Like training a dog, you had to hit them. After a moment of contemplation, he knew goblins were nocturnal creatures, but they could also act during the day without any problem. He said, do you want ironware? Yes, Brother Lin. Hearing the word ironware, the goblin's eyes lit up. Do you want to mate with humans? Yes. 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 Do you want to eat meat until you're full? Yes. Do you want to mate with elves? Definitely. Ah, elves. With just a few words, the goblins were extremely excited. They would probably be willing to die for the ironware. They all raised their arms and shouted, long live Brother Lin. At this moment, no one noticed the goblin priest in the shack staring at Lintian through the darkness, his expression complex. Seeing the mood was right, Lintian gave his orders. All of you, go out and find all kinds of stones for me. As many as possible. Brother Lin, why do we need to find stones? A goblin scratched its big head in confusion. One of the more noticeable ones jumped out. It must be because Brother Lin likes eating walnuts and needs stones to crack them. Your head looks like a walnut. This is an important step in smelting iron. Now hurry up and find them, Lintian said impatiently. Explaining what kind of ore was iron ore would be too difficult for them to understand. He would have to wait until someone found a piece, then let them see it with their own eyes to tell the difference. After all, he didn't have to look for it himself, so he could order them around as he pleased. What goblins lacked in everything, they made up for in numbers. But he hadn't expected it to take a full 2 days before a goblin finally found a piece of iron ore. In the following days, all the goblins went out looking for ore. But even after searching the entire area, they didn't find much. As expected, iron ore was a rare resource coveted by high-intelligence species. It seemed they would have to seize the elf tribe's iron mine in the future. Nearly 10 days, and we've only gathered this little, barely enough to make 10 short swords, Lintian said bitterly, looking at the 7 or 8 lumps of ore in front of him. But then he had a flash of inspiration. Since they couldn't make many short swords, they could make spears. They could make at least 50 spearheads. The spear shafts could be replaced with sturdy wood. With 50 spears, they could easily capture the elf tribe's iron mine and fully arm themselves. In a 10-kilometer radius, no creature would dare provoke this tribe. They spent another day building a clay furnace to facilitate iron smelting. Other goblins were tasked with breaking the ore into small pieces. You lot, come over here and keep the fire burning well. If the fire dies down, I'll throw you in, Lintian ordered. The melting point of iron was over 500 degrees, so the fire had to be big and intense. The whole tribe was illuminated by the firelight all night long, while the iron was being smelted. Lintian trained 2 goblins in blacksmithing and making molds, as he couldn't do it all by himself. Lintian asked Goblin, what kind of weapon do you like? She was the first female goblin ever, and he needed to make not only a weapon for her, but also a set of simple armor. Goblin was at a loss. 2 don't know. You said you liked the moon, so I'll make a crescent moon blade for you. Finally, everything was ready, and the life simulation's cooldown had refreshed. Now was the time. Sitting there, Lintian's gaze involuntarily turned to the central shack. That old creature would probably try to kill him once he finished forging these weapons, so he had to be fully prepared. System. Start the life simulation. Chapter 5. Chapter 5. Kill the Goblin Priest. Life simulation system is starting. Current scenario. Iron making. Over 10 days, you gathered some iron ore and crafted 50 iron spears. Your prestige in the entire tribe far surpassed that of the Goblin Priest. The goblins even started calling you boss. The powerful Goblin Priest couldn't accept such a situation and planned to kill you to reclaim his prestige. Option 1. Design a plan to kill the Goblin Priest and take control of the tribe. Score 20. Option 2. Flee the tribe. Score remains unchanged. Option 3. Abandon your prestige. Submit to the Goblin Priest and bide your time, waiting for the best opportunity. Score 10. Escaping was impossible. Leaving now, after all you had done, would be a huge loss. Also, leaving would likely result in death in the enchanted forest. Submitting would delay your revenge. You couldn't wait that long. So, you chose the first option. After all, the purpose of the life simulation system was to make mistakes and learn from them. If you failed, you could understand the situation better and prepare more effectively. You wanted to rise to power in one move and poison the Goblin Priest's food. However, the Goblin Priest turned the tables on you. He was cautious enough to feed the food to his pet mouse first. Your assassination attempt failed, and you escaped with severe injuries. You lingered in the enchanted forest for 3 months, surviving by madly mating with any suitable-sized creatures you caught. Half a year later, you finally evolved into a big goblin variant, the Goblin Warrior, and established a goblin tribe of over 100 members. Each goblin was equipped with iron weapons and armor, making them extremely powerful. You led your army back to kill the Goblin Priest and took Gobu Yue with you. Through various channels, you learned that the Stubbled Man's hero team was in the human territory of Brighttown, and you gathered all your forces to launch a surprise attack. Unfortunately, the Sword Saintess happened to be there to celebrate her disciple Loder's birthday. You suffered heavy losses and barely escaped with Gobu Yue by using a magic array exchanged from the system. Another half year passed, and you established a medium-sized tribe of 300 goblins, and were on the verge of evolving into a hero variant, with 3 big goblin subordinates. Gobuyue's strength also improved significantly, and she grew into a beautiful goblin. The current life simulation can last up to 1 year. Forced termination. Summary. You improved rapidly through hard work, but suffered repeated setbacks due to bad luck. May the gods bless you. Score. 50 out of 100. Reward. 50 life points. This life simulation is complete, with a time span of 365 days. Would you like to transmigrate to the final progress of the simulation? If you refuse, it cannot be changed later. Lin Tian frowned slightly. Overall, evolving into a big goblin variant and nearly becoming a hero variant was quite good. The main issue was failing to kill the stubbled man. This significantly slowed down his growth. It seemed unnecessary, since the grass had been stirred up. Even if he transmigrated a year later to deal with the stubbled man, the latter would be prepared. It wouldn't be easy to kill him. In general, the life simulation was a way to learn from mistakes and gain experience from failures. This time wasn't perfect, but he could try again in 10 days. Lin Tian returned to reality. He needed to deal with the old and cunning goblin priest. Poisoning didn't work, so he had to rely on brute force. He decided to use all 50 life points to exchange for experience pills. Currently, his level cap was 10. He needed to continue devouring the flesh of powerful monsters or engage in mating. Humans. Capturing one would be too risky. Elves. Even more out of the question. Monsters were also difficult. The only female around was his little brother, Gobuyue. After a brief hesitation, Lin Tian said, Gobuyue, I have something to discuss with you. Come with me to the forest? Okay, boss. Gobuyue jumped up, waving her small hands and walking with large strides, looking very happy as she followed Lin Tian into the dark woods. The further they went, the quieter it became. The strange and unknown environment made Gobuyue a bit scared. She kept looking around warily and said nervously, Boss, how far are we going? Gobuyue, what do you think of me? They had reached a sufficient distance. Lin Tian finally stopped, turned around, and looked directly at Gobuyue. Gobuyue was a bit confused but answered seriously. Although I haven't known you for long, I think you are a very good goblin. There's no better goblin in the world than you. Upon hearing this, Lin Tian suddenly pushed Gobuyue against a tree in a forceful kabadon. He then tore off her robe. Boss, no. What are you doing? Gobuyue panicked, struggling to grab her robe, but she was too weak compared to Lin Tian. In the dark, goblins had good vision without needing moonlight. He could clearly see Gobuyue's appearance, unlike male goblins. She didn't have an exaggeratedly large head or a particularly long nose. She only had sharp teeth and pointed ears, along with green skin. Her short pink hair, even shorter than shoulder length, looked especially cute. Her eyes were actually golden, carrying a hint of shyness and panic. Her petite figure was like that of a toy doll. Who knew goblins could look like this? Sorry. Gobuyue? But we need to survive. Lin Tian almost got lost in her appearance. Feeling embarrassed under his gaze, Gobuyue shyly asked, Boss, do I look strange? Lin Tian's eyes were dreamy as he stared deeply into her eyes. No. You're the most beautiful goblin girl I've ever seen. Your eyes have stars in them. Can you help me get stronger? I'll leave a gift for you. Boss, what are you going to do? If there's nothing important, I want to go to sleep. Gobuyue fidgeted, a blush appearing on her green cheeks. Lin Tian, ignoring any preliminaries, said, Gobuyue, it's time for you, as my subordinate, to help your boss out. Are you ready? To might? Maybe, probably not. Gobuyue stammered, her little heart starting to pound. Suddenly, Lin Tian pulled her into his embrace, feeling her warm breath. His eyes darted. Looking very scared, she tried to speak but was silenced by Lin Tian's kiss, unable to say a word, only able to weakly resist when the power of the goblin god's blessing activated. Even a female goblin couldn't resist. She was completely subdued. At dawn, Lin Tian carried the exhausted Gobuyue back to the tribe. There were still important tasks to handle, like the iron ore in the furnace, which might burn out. Fortunately, the goblins he had taught weren't entirely useless. They had already refined the iron ore multiple times, removing many impurities. It was nearly pure enough to make iron tools. He immediately began crafting an iron breastplate for Gobuyue to protect her chest and back. For a weapon, something smaller would suffice. The remaining iron spears were left for the other goblins to make. Gobuyue, still lying down. Come see if this fits. After binding 2 iron plates with twine, Lin Tian took them to Gobuyue. However, she was still lying in her grass nest, sleeping soundly but sweetly. Lin Tian shrugged helplessly. Since she was still asleep, he decided to check his own attributes. Small goblin. Level 7, max level 14. Race, goblin. Profession, none. Title, low-level monster. Blasphemer, God's blessing. Potential god, health, 40. Strength, 10. Defense, 9. Skill, gene devour. Equipment, none. Overall, 65. His attributes had significantly improved but were still far from enough. What did those titles mean? Unfortunately, he couldn't view them through the system. Lin Tian frowned. Why had his level cap only increased by 7? It seemed mating with random wild boars, monkeys, or rabbits would have been better, as it could increase the cap by 10 levels. A female goblin, a legendary creature, should have offered more. It was baffling. 7 levels, 7 times. Huh, I get it. As he thought about it, a light bulb went off in Lin Tian's head. He looked at the sleeping Gobu Yue with a wicked grin. Boss, what are you doing again? Gobu Yue woke up groggily from her sleep, as expected. After finishing, Lin Tian's eyes lit up. With a female goblin, each mating session increased his level cap by 1. With no limit on the number of times, other creatures had caps. For instance, with wild boars or monkeys. No matter how many times, the cap would only increase by 10 levels. With humans, such as human females or elves, the cap would increase by 20 levels. But their talent would greatly enhance his abilities. To further increase, he had to devour the flesh of powerful creatures. In simple terms, the females of each race were like level cap boosters for goblins, tools for getting stronger, while their flesh served as experience packs. Today, Lin Tian increased his level cap to 25, completely exhausted. He collapsed into a deep sleep. This wasn't his limit, but the limit of his goblin body. When he woke up, he found himself being lifted high by a crowd of goblins. Brother Lin. Brother Lin. All around were cheers and celebrations. Lin Tian quickly realized that all the iron spears had been completed. Brother Lin. We finished making the iron weapons. Can we attack the elves now? One goblin asked excitedly. Lin Tian shook his head. We need to cut down some long, slender logs. The more, the better. Everyone, move out. The spearheads were ready, but they still needed spear shafts. The key was to get all the goblins out. Once the goblins left for the forest, Lin Tian turned his gaze to the gray-black hut. If the goblins were around, it would be impossible to attack the goblin priest because he possessed the summon skill, which could control these goblins. With 50 life points, I can exchange for 50 experience pills, but I wonder if that will be enough to max out my level. Lin Tian exchanged all the points in one go. He immediately maxed out his level and still had 20 experience pills left. He then realized that fewer points were needed for lower levels and more for higher levels. He checked his attribute panel. Now, his health had reached 20, strength 20, defense 7, and overall 150. It was far inferior to humans or magical beasts. In total, he was still weaker than the goblin priest, who had already evolved into a big goblin variant. Damn, goblins are so weak, I'll have to rely on equipment. Lin Tian donned the makeshift plate armor and the crescent moon blade he had crafted. His strength instantly increased to 50, and his defense reached an impressive 30. His overall strength slightly surpassed the 200 of the goblin priest. Killing him was now entirely possible. At that moment, unexpectedly, the goblin priest himself came out, coldly asking, "Where did the other goblins go?" "Boss, I sent them to gather materials for making iron tools." Lin Tian replied with a flattering look. The goblin priest narrowed his eyes slightly and just gave a hum before preparing to return. Lin Tian then called out, "Boss, I just made this iron tool. Take a look." "Oh, bring it here." The goblin priest showed interest and stopped. Lin Tian was planning to play the role of Jing Ke, trying to assassinate the Qin Emperor. As long as he could catch the old guy by surprise, his chances of success were 100%. The priest was old and frail, with very low health. 2 or 3 strikes could actually kill him. He slowly approached with the crescent moon blade. The goblin priest's eyes were fixed on the scythe, just as Lin Tian was a step away. The priest suddenly spoke. "Put the scythe on the ground. I'll take it myself." Lin Tian's heart skipped a beat. This old guy was wary to such an extent. He must have suspected Lin Tian's intelligence was too high, hence his caution. Other goblins wouldn't even be believed capable of plotting such treachery. The situation became more severe. To avoid suspicion, Lin Tian reluctantly placed the crescent moon blade on the ground. Chapter 6. Hunting Elves. The goblin priest walked slowly, bent down, and picked up the weapon. He had a face full of a sinister smile. "It's really iron." Suddenly, his expression changed, and he glared coldly at Lin Tian. "You can die now." The next second, he charged at Lin Tian with the knife in hand. His speed was incredibly fast. What? This old thing is so insidious? Lin Tian had thought he definitely wanted to kill him, but he hadn't expected him to be so straightforward. He even knew to strike first and use diversionary tactics. Clang! The sound of iron colliding rang out, sparks flying everywhere. The goblin priest, thinking he had succeeded, laughed sinisterly again. "Here, goblins like you are not allowed to exist." But turning his head, he saw Lin Tian still standing there unscathed, because Lin Tian was wearing plate armor. He had withstood the blow. The goblin priest's eyes widened instantly in anger, wanting to roar, but felt a sharp pain in his chest. Looking down, he saw a sharp spearhead had somehow pierced into him. I'll kill you." The goblin priest couldn't care about anything else, and continued to resist. Lin Tian wasn't foolish. He had long left a backup plan, hiding several spearheads on his body. When the priest charged, he threw them directly. Swish, swish, swish. In an instant, he took the priest down. His head, chest, arms, and face were all pierced with sharp spearheads. Weaker than I imagined. It seems I overestimated the defensive power of goblins. Lin Tian hadn't expected to win so easily and remarked with a sigh. By killing him, he could take over this group of goblins, then rapidly grow them to seek revenge on the stubbled man and the white-robed nun. The goblin priest, lying on the ground, wailed like a slaughtered pig. "Don't kill me, please. I took you in. You can't kill me." He made a pitiful crying face, but it was extremely creepy. Lin Tian's expression changed slightly, surprised by this moral coercion, but he quickly recovered. This guy knowing these tactics wasn't too much. He said, "Did you forget that I am a goblin?" Lin Tian's expression was very cold, his eyes filled with evil killing intent. He was a goblin now. How could he be morally coerced? If he wanted to kill, he would kill. At this moment, the goblins who had gone out to find wooden sticks came back one after another. Seeing this scene, they all became enraged and ferocious, extremely excited, but didn't know what to do. The goblin priest, as if grabbing a lifeline, hurriedly activated the summon skill. "Kill him! Kill him!" This voice shattered the forest's tranquility, piercingly loud. However, the goblins remained unmoved, only slightly hesitant. The goblin priest, already in such a miserable state, had lost all authority, and his call skill was ineffective. Lin Tian picked up the crescent moon blade on the ground, walked up to him. "From now on, I am your new boss. I will lead you to attack the elves, attack humans, ferociously mate, and have endless meat to eat." In a moment, cheers erupted. New boss, new boss, slash. Lin Tian cut off one of the goblin priest's arms and threw it to the goblin crowd. "Boss, boss!" The goblins swarmed like bees, beginning to fight over the food. Lin Tian then stepped aside, allowing the goblin crowd to completely devour the priest, eating him clean. Now, he was the boss of this group of goblins, and he had gained the call skill. "Boss, what's going on?" Gobu Yue was awakened by the noise, supported herself with a wooden stick, and came out to check the situation. Lin Tian explained it to her, almost scaring her silly. "You killed the priest." "Oh my god, his attributes were so high. Thanks to your help. You go back to rest, I'll handle things here." Then Lin Tian calmed the emotions of the many goblins. He completed equipping all the iron spears, a total of 50, which multiplied the combat power of this small tribe several times. He continued his victory speech, telling them to keep looking for iron ore. The more the better. Not only should every goblin have a weapon, but they also needed armor. This way, they could defeat the elves, capture more breeding tools, and expand the tribe's population. The goblin infants born from elves could naturally grow into big goblins. Their strength far surpassed those born from animals. 5 days passed. This time, they finally collected enough ore. They began large-scale iron smelting, until everyone was equipped with armor and weapons. Looking at this goblin tribe from afar was terrifying. It was comparable to an army. The pity was their low intelligence and lack of tactics. In battles, they basically relied on instinct. "Today, we will go to the enchanted forest to kill monsters. You must follow my orders, or you will die." Lin Tian stood on a rock and shouted to all the goblins in the tribe. He planned to train them so that attacking the elves would be easier when the time came. Immediately, the goblin army set off in grand fashion. Their formation was orderly, and their momentum was extremely strong. Birds flew away in fright, and animals fled. Soon, in the distance, they saw a tier 3 enchanted creature, a black-brown giant bear, devouring a large horned deer. His body was as large as an elephant. The surrounding fallen towering trees were enough to prove how ferocious this monster was. Killing it would be too difficult, far beyond what this group of goblins could manage. At most, they could look for some tier 2 enchanted creatures. Finally, they encountered a pack of tier 2 enchanted wolves. There were 7 or 8 of them, each as large as a donkey. These were creatures even the elves didn't dare provoke. Among the fiercest and most powerful of tier 2, they were fast, strong, and even capable of climbing trees. The key was that the head wolf could command tactics. They roamed the enchanted forest without fear. Hearing the low growls of the evil wolves, some goblins were trembling in fear. "Boss, are we hunting the enchanted wolves?" Lin Tian thought for a moment and finally decided, "Yes, if we kill the enchanted wolves, our strength will increase significantly." Checking through the system, he found that the enchanted wolves had a powerful skill, iron-blooded wolf nature. Once blood was seen, their wolf nature would be triggered, gaining a 20% boost to all attributes and not feeling pain. You go left, you go right. Surround the wolf pack. Under Lin Tian's authoritative command, all the goblins suppressed their fear and obediently surrounded the pack of evil wolves. Apply pressure immediately. At Lin Tian's order, all the goblins began to close in, pointing their iron spears at the wolves, forcing them closer together. The enchanted wolves started to grow agitated, growling and randomly charging at the iron spears. They wanted to break out. But after a few attempts, they were all cut and bleeding. Lin Tian commanded from the side, "Hold steady. Don't panic. Press them tighter. Now!" They just needed to let the enchanted wolves doom themselves. Sure enough, the wolf pack began to panic, no longer listening to the head wolf's commands, and they started to charge wildly. Each wolf was covered in wounds from the spears. Soon, they lost too much blood and began to collapse one by one. The goblin formation only got slightly disordered. After all, the enchanted wolves were still very strong. Great, we killed them. We can even eat enchanted wolves? Long live the boss. Long live. All the goblins raised their hands and cheered. They immediately started to divide and consume the enchanted wolves. Gained ability. Iron Blood passive skill. In combat, seeing blood grants a 20% boost to all attributes and negates pain for 3 minutes. After eating, the system prompt sounded in Lin Tian's mind. This was the Goblin's exclusive skill, Gene Devour, growing stronger by devouring powerful creatures. Although they were initially the weakest monsters, they had the potential to become the strongest. No wonder they were monsters blessed by the gods. Glancing around, he saw that most goblins had reached level 10, with the highest at level 13. Their attributes had also doubled, but it was still far from enough. Next, they needed to continue hunting monsters, ultimately aiming to hunt the black-brown giant bear. If they devoured its giant mountain skill, these goblins' health, strength, and defense would all multiply. It was unimaginable how strong they could become. 3 days passed. This mighty goblin army had killed 3 Tier 2 monsters, the enchanted wolves, giant-toothed boars, and earthstone monsters, 4 Tier 1 monsters, tailless cats, ghost-faced monkeys, double-headed snakes, and wandering spirits, besides iron-blooded wolf nature. They also gained the giant tooth skill, allowing their teeth to grow larger and stronger, increasing attack power as they grew. Then there was Stone Skin, which added 15 points to their basic defense, equivalent to wearing plate armor. The most important abilities came from the Tier 1 monsters, ghost-faced monkeys and tailless cats. Climbing and silent steps, these would be crucial when attacking the elf tribe. The remaining abilities weren't very useful. The double-headed snake could secrete venom, and the wandering spirit could turn into a ghost for a while after death. But for now, it was enough. At this moment, they heard the ground begin to vibrate rhythmically. Some enormous monster was approaching. Lin Tian instantly became alert. It's here at the right time. The black-brown giant bear. Everyone climbed the trees. Caw, caw, caw. A group of goblins shrieked, climbing the straight trees like monkeys, hiding in the darkness. Sure enough, the elephant-sized black-brown giant bear appeared, its crimson eyes like 2 bulbs. They shone brightly in the dark. Whoosh, whoosh. Its heavy breathing was particularly eerie. Its sheer size constantly reminded everyone that it was a giant beast, estimated to weigh 20 tons. Although it was similar to an elephant, its bone density, muscle content, and steel-like fur added even more weight. In this enchanted forest, it truly ruled unchallenged. Every creature avoided it, even the enchanted wolf packs. The black-brown giant bear sniffed the air, discovered the mushrooms Lin Tian had thrown, and hurriedly started eating. Only then did everyone see its terrifying size. Incredibly robust, it radiated an invisible pressure. It made people unconsciously slow their breathing. Black-brown giant bear. LV33. Race. Tier 3 monster. Title. Fierce and brutal. Keep your distance. Immovable as a mountain. Health. 1022. Strength. 219. Defense. 300. Skills. Savage tier. Rampage. Giant mountain. Overall. 410. The black-brown giant bear devoured the mushrooms in huge mouthfuls, consuming over 100 pounds in the blink of an eye. It was about to leave. Having finally reached the perfect attack position, how could Lin Tian let it go? He gave the order. Shoot it. From the treetops, the goblins all let out roars. They swung their iron spears and thrust them down, one spear after another, but they soon regretted it. Iron spears couldn't even pierce the black-brown giant bear's skin. A Tier 3 monster's power far exceeded that of Tier 2. Being attacked, the black-brown giant bear went berserk instantly, crashing around wildly. Although it couldn't climb trees. With a casual collision, trees dozens of meters high fell like matchsticks. The goblins were thrown into a frenzy, fleeing for their lives. Lin Tian's expression was solemn but not panicked. That can't be right. The deathcap mushroom's poison can kill even Tier 4 monsters. How is this one not dead after eating so many? Is it immune? But he had checked earlier. The black-brown giant bear didn't have a poison immunity skill. Among the mushrooms it had eaten, many were highly toxic, and the iron spears were coated with the double-headed snake's paralyzing venom. 1. It seemed this beast was just too large, and the poison was taking too long to act. One by one, goblins screamed as the black-brown giant bear devoured them. In no time, 4 or 5 goblins had been eaten. Suddenly, Lin Tian's eyes lit up. If you don't die, who will? These goblins all had the double-headed snake's venom secretion ability. Once ingested, the poison would act faster. The black-brown giant bear's movements began to wobble. It tried to knock down trees but couldn't aim properly. Boom! With a loud crash, the black-brown giant bear fell. Caw, caw, caw! Seeing this scene, all the goblins cheered wildly. Lin Tian quickly ordered, eat it all, gain the skill, and then leave quickly. Gene Devour didn't guarantee an immediate skill acquisition, but there was a high probability. Congratulations to the host for acquiring the giant mountain ability, doubling health. After eating, despite a lot of the black-brown giant bear's flesh remaining, they had to abandon it. The earlier commotion would surely attract more monsters. Returning to the tribe, Lin Tian was pleased to see these goblins. All their strengths significantly increased. Small goblin. Elvic gain. Race. Goblin. Profession. None. Title. Low-level monster. God's blessing. Beast Slayer. Health. 231. Strength. 29. Defense. 40. Skills. Gene Devour. Iron-blooded wolf nature. Giant tooth. Stone skin. Equipment. Simple iron spear. Simple plate armor. Overall, 250. Now, even an ordinary goblin had a total strength over 200, comparable to an average human adventurer. During this time, Lin Tian hadn't neglected Gobu Yue either, whose level had risen to 3, with an overall strength of 400, comparable to the stubbled man back then. After going through so much, our strength has finally qualitatively improved. Lin Tian felt deeply moved. In the tribe, The bonfire burned brightly, emitting the aroma of roasted meat. Compared to other transmigrators, his power increased too slowly, but it was the maximum extent possible. In this brutal world, where death lurked at every turn, survival was a huge challenge. Boss, what are we gonna do next? Goblin asked curiously. She had become like a little cat, always following Lin Tian around. Very obedient, she had completely become his toy. But Lin Tian still treated her as a friend. He pondered. It's almost time to attack the elf tribe. That will greatly enhance our tribe's strength. Logically, their current power was enough to deal with the stubbled man, but that guy's master was the Sword Saintess. If they were unlucky and ran into her, they would still face a crushing defeat. So, they needed to capture elves first, breed a new generation of goblins, and then have a perfect chance. Lin Tian didn't want to go through such tormenting experiences again. This time, he was the hunter. But to be a hunter, he had to sharpen his blade first. To the north, in the Myriad Forms forest, lay the elf tribe. Many towering trees grew here, their trunks usually more than 10 meters thick. The elves liked to carve out wooden houses high up in these trunks to live in. It was an excellent way to avoid enemies. Coupled with their proficiency in using bows and arrows, it made the place easy to defend and hard to attack. Many monsters, and even humans, came and could only leave in disgrace. As a result, the elves had occupied the forest for thousands of years.